Isaac looks across the crowd at his college graduation ceremony and is filled with a mix of emotions. He waves at his mom, grandmother, and brother up in the stands. He's the first person in his family to graduate from college, which has made them all proud. But now they are worried to see him moving to the city on his own for his first job. Isaac's best friend stands next to him as the ceremony begins. As he prepares to walk across the stage, he takes a deep breath. What awaits him on the other side, he isn't certain, but he's worked hard. And with the support of his family and friends, he's gotten this far. He can handle what comes next. As he takes his diploma, he exhales, determined and optimistic as he begins the next chapter of his life. Like many new graduates, Isaac wonders, how will he continue to develop his sense of self when encountering new adult roles and contexts? What will help him choose his career direction? How will relationships with friends and family influence his path into adulthood? Will he find romance as he grows into an independent individual? In this chapter, you will find out what the current research says about all these questions and more. Tell me about yourself. Chad had been mulling over this question in the few days since his blind date. It's such a simple question, but he had a hard time answering it as he attempted to figure out what, exactly, this prospective partner might find interesting to know about him. Did they want to know that he considers himself friendly, introverted, trustworthy, and hardworking? Or that he's a total foodie, a D&D fan, and someone who hopes to learn to scuba dive someday? Who is he? In this section, we focus on the development of self and personality in emerging and early adulthood. The self encompasses all our personal characteristics. APA 2023. It is the way we see ourselves, represent ourselves, and relate to others. The self is considered a broader and more complex part of our development than our personality or identity, discussed later in this chapter. We'll also examine developmental tasks and life events at this stage, and the way they shape our sense of self. Finally, we'll consider the frameworks of Erikson and other theorists who explain why our sense of self changes as we move into adulthood, and how that change relates to our personality traits. Developmental tasks, growing independence, and role change. Between the ages of 18 and 29, U.S. adults may experience several significant life changes, such as leaving the parental home, completing school, entering the workforce, forming a committed romantic relationship, and becoming a parent. Many, if not all, these events require or result in increasing independence and role change, that in turn contribute to the development of self. In preparation for these tasks, developmental psychologist Jeffrey Arnett, 2000, suggested that emerging adulthood, ages 18 to 25, is characterized by a period of extensive exploration of new roles and adult commitments. Young adults place more priority on personal growth-oriented opportunities that have the potential to increase their social relationships, status, and vocational success, compared to older adults who place greater priority on their health and pro-social engagement. Regardless of age, it is how attainable we perceive our goals to be that predicts our well-being. Bueller et al., 2019. Scales and colleagues, 2015, assert that successful development means more than just completing a developmental task or reaching a personal goal, but also being able to develop with a thriving orientation, reflected by growth in a young adult's well-being and maturity as they encounter changing roles and contexts. Based on this perspective, Scales and colleagues conducted an extensive review of cross-cultural research and identified 8 dimensions of well-being that reflect a successful young adulthood: physical health, psychological and emotional well-being, life skills, ethical behavior, healthy family and social relationships, educational attainment, constructive educational and occupational engagement, civic engagement. Scales et al., 2015, Figure 12.2. Scales and colleagues intended this list to be inclusive enough to reflect developmental success in early adulthood for a variety of people, but the way we measure or interpret each dimension is filtered through our own cultural context. For example, young adults from more traditional communities or collectivistic cultures may view the pathway to developing, quote, healthy family relationships as living in and contributing to their parents' household, whereas other young adults might measure it by their ability to leave the parental home and support themselves. Let's take a closer look at the way cultural changes influence our perspective of developmental success in early adulthood. The social clock and the cultural context of social development. Cultural expectations about normative behavior and achievements are often associated with age and create a social clock by which we judge the progress of ourselves and others. Newgarten et al., 1965. Social clock expectations do not necessarily reflect what is real or typical, but instead are idealized milestones. For example, in the United States, a widespread expectation is that college education should begin immediately after high school graduation and be completed within 4 years by age 22. In reality, fewer than half of U.S. college students complete their college education within this time frame, U.S. Department of Education 2019. Social clock milestones are set by a person's culture and generation, as well as their age. Take the developmental task of leaving your parents' home. The number of young U.S. adults who live with their parents has increased somewhat over the last 75 years, and young men are more likely to do so than young women. Hatfield, 2023. But the percentage has peaked during times of national emergency, such as during the Great Depression, 48%, and the start of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020, 52%. Fry et al., 2020. Figure 12.3. Currently, 1/3 of U.S. adults aged 18 to 34 live with their parents. Compare that number with recent reports from the European Union, where in many countries such as Italy, Greece, and Croatia, 2/3 of young adults live at home with their parents. Figure 12.4. If we measure success in young adulthood by the person's well-being in their changing roles and contexts, what happens when a young adult or others perceive them to be on or off time with their social clock? In many cultures, most developmental tasks of young adulthood are considered positive, such as graduation, Shanahan and Busseri, 2019, and not completing them may be seen negatively. Self-evaluation based on completion of developmental tasks in young adulthood appears to be cross-cultural. In both the culture of Turkey and the culture of Switzerland, young adults report greater life satisfaction when they achieve these goals. What differs across cultures are the developmental priorities. Life satisfaction of Turkish young adults is positively affected by on-time achievement of traditional family tasks such as marriage and parenthood, whereas Swiss young adults were more focused on individual achievements such as education and independent living. Pekel Uludagli and Akbas, 2019. Krings et al., 2008. These differing priorities are echoed by interviews with diverse young adults in the United States. Those from immigrant families and ethnic and racial minorities are more likely to view the transition to adulthood as preparation for the roles and responsibilities of interdependence, such as living within or contributing to an intergenerational family household or business, than to prioritize individuality and independence. Swartz et al., 2017, page 280. Overall, today's young adults appear to care about the traditional goals prescribed by their social clocks, such as career and marriage, but they also pursue personal priorities like independence, maturity, and confidence. Those in the United States report that normative milestones like graduating and starting a career matter to them, but are not prerequisites to adult maturity, and thus they can be flexible about when they complete them. Swartz et al., 2017. Based on hundreds of interviews around the country, Swartz and colleagues, 2017, concluded that today's young adults felt fairly comfortable with the uncertainty and ambiguity, social status-wise, of the transition to adulthood. They took it as almost natural and inevitable, nearly desiring and celebrating the lack of certainty for its flexibility, freedom, and openness. Page 4. This generational shift in young adults' perspective on the social clock is likely an adaptation to the rapid pace of cultural change. In addition to staying longer in their parents' home, they are also prolonging their education, marrying later, having children later, changing jobs more frequently, and even remaining dependent on their parents' healthcare plan longer than previous generations. VESPA, 2017. Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, 2023. What accounts for these changes? Young adults are responding to the changing circumstances of the world around them that have sometimes created more opportunities, but also set up more potential obstacles. Swartz et al., 2017. That said, many young adults still might feel some stress or anxiety if those in their close friend or social group seem to be achieving developmental tasks before they do. Feeling off time from your social group, particularly if you are behind their schedule, can create some invisible pressure to adhere to the social clock. Opportunities and obstacles. Today's young adults can search for educational and employment opportunities, dating partners, and new homes without getting out of bed. They can learn, work, and maintain personal connections online. Access to education, information, and social connection has increased, and the methods by which young adults interact with their world have changed. Young U.S. adults are also living in an increasingly diverse nation. According to the U.S. Census Diversity Index, In 2010, the chance that two randomly chosen individuals would be from different racial or ethnic groups was just over half, at 54.9%. U.S. Census Bureau 2020, figure 12.5. By 2020, it was 61.6%, given greater diversity among younger than older age groups. Menchaca et al. 2023, U.S. Census Bureau 2020. This growing diversity is reflected in the increasing variety of experiences in emerging adulthood, and it disrupts the assumptions of a one-size-fits-all social clock. However, sometimes a young person's possible pathways are limited by economic, social, and cultural constraints, which we must also consider when navigating the shifting cultural landscape. Economic conditions can impede young adults' progress on developmental goals like continuing their education and living independently. Over the last 40 years, the United States and other nations have increasingly evolved into knowledge economies in which financial success depends largely on technological skill and innovation, scientific knowledge and progress, and intellectual breakthroughs. Burkes and Gaetani, 2023. The industries that accomplish these tasks rely on a more highly educated workforce. Not surprisingly then, 74% of the high school class of 2023 reported they wanted to go to college. Bauer-Wolf, 2023. However, only 66% expect to attend, and in many states like Arizona, Idaho, and Utah, the percentage that enroll is 50% or lower. NCHEMS, 2018. Many cite cost as a major barrier. Even when adjusting for inflation, the average cost of attending a four-year college has increased 180% in the last 40 years. McGurran and Hahn, 2023. Higher education isn't the only avenue to independence with financial barriers. With skyrocketing home prices, interest rates, and utility costs, a recent report concluded that housing hasn't been so unaffordable in the United States since 1984. Bonney, 2023. Robbins and Wilner, 2001, coined the term quarter-life crisis to describe feelings of helplessness, panic, indecision, and apprehension that may accompany the expectations of emerging adulthood. In a meta-analysis of research published over the last 10 years, Hashim and colleagues, 2024, identified both individual and environmental factors that may influence whether a young adult experiences these feelings. Figure 12.6. Inflexibly committing to goals without space for reflection can make young people feel trapped and anxious. This anxiety can be lowered by perceived social support and spirituality. However, when young adults perceived their family or community as exerting too much influence, pressure, or judgment, it increased the likelihood of negative experiences during the early adult transition, particularly for adults from families with collectivistic cultural values. Faced with so many challenges and choices, however, young adults are particularly good at adaptive decision-making. They can efficiently review and integrate information in task-specific ways. Lindo and Lang, 2022. Perhaps that is why, contrary to the looming threat of the quarter-life crisis, reported life satisfaction typically increases for most over the course of young adulthood. Switek and Easterlin, 2018. Even when he used the term crisis within his own work, Erikson did not mean impending catastrophe, but rather a necessary turning point. Erikson, 1968, page 16. And consistent with the research, relationships with others are important to developmental success during that turning point in time. Life hacks. Thriving during the quarter-life crisis. Looking back, young adults who have been through the quarter-life crisis provide the following advice. Davis and Yates, 2014. Change your environment. Even a temporary change in surroundings like a visit home or a short vacation can provide space to reset and reflect. Practice self-awareness. Workplace psychologists call this process taking stock. Panchal and Jackson, 2007. Take time to review your situation. Pay attention when something doesn't feel right, and consider how to leverage your strengths. Be decisive. Have confidence in your feelings and follow through with your decisions. Practicing self-assurance doesn't mean staying committed to bad situations, but rather following your gut. And sometimes that means changing what you are doing. Taye. Stay positive. Tell yourself it will be okay. Let go of your own negative thoughts. Challenge the negative voices of others, and reject toxic environments. Practice resilience. Few things in life go as planned. Get comfortable with a little trial and error. Be prepared to tweak and adapt as you go. Think about your finances. While money doesn't buy happiness, it does provide stability. Spend carefully, save what you can, and think long-term. Find support. Friends, family, coworkers, and community members, in whom you can confide and with whom you can share feelings and find acceptance, are a bedrock in times of change and uncertainty. The role of intimacy. Many classic theories about the development of self in early adulthood focus on the value of establishing committed and meaningful relationships with others. We begin this section with Erikson's early adult challenge of intimacy versus isolation, and the perspectives of other thinkers such as psychologists George Vaillant and Daniel Levinson, and writer Gail Sheehy. Theory of psychosocial development. Erikson's theory of psychosocial development in early adulthood is called intimacy versus isolation, reflecting the challenge of establishing close and trusting relationships with others. While these relationships might include romantic or sexual ones, Erikson was clear that psychological intimacy can be achieved in any relationship in which you demonstrate the ability to fuse your identity with someone else's without the fear that you are going to lose something yourself. Evans, 1967, page 48. And that trusting partnerships can be found in the context of friendship, combat, leadership, love, and inspiration. Erikson, 1959, page 101. Erikson asserted that intimacy, whether with a close friend, fellow soldier, or romantic partner, requires a commitment that builds trust, but also vulnerability and willingness to sacrifice and compromise. Those unwilling to experience it are likely to become psychologically and socially isolated. On the surface, this developmental challenge can appear to undermine the need for increasing independence and self-sufficiency that characterizes many of the developmental tasks discussed earlier. However, research on early adulthood is clear. Social connectedness is key to a successful early adult transition. Indeed, early adulthood is associated with increasing feelings of family obligation, and those who report feeling needed and useful to their friends and family are more likely to also report receiving greater support and experiencing higher well-being during the early adult transition. Fouligny and Pedersen, 2002. Fouligny et al., 2022. Figure 12.8. Related theories of early adult development. Based on his 60-year longitudinal study of more than 500 men as they embarked on adulthood, psychologist George Vaillant, 1977, 1993, 2002, affirmed Erikson's developmental framework and the early adult challenge of intimacy versus isolation, in particular as it applied to men in the cohort Vaillant studied. But Vaillant added two new elements. First, he inserted a transitional stage at the end of early adulthood that he called career consolidation, a time to reconcile the early adulthood tasks of intimacy and career exploration, and a bridge to the generative priorities of middle adulthood. Second, Vaillant documented that adults cope with the stress and anxieties of developmental tasks by using defense mechanisms, which vary in their effectiveness and maturity. In the context of intimacy versus isolation, Vaillant identified affiliation as one of the most mature and healthy coping mechanisms. Affiliation allows us to reduce the anxiety of developmental tasks by confiding in others and being willing to ask for and receive their help and support in solving problems. On the other hand, Vaillant described help-rejecting complaining as an immature defense mechanism that keeps others at a distance at the expense of healthy development. Adults employing this response to anxiety will complain about their problems and yet reject offers to help, judging the suggestions as useless or not good enough. Di Giuseppe and Perry, 2021. Psychologist Daniel Levinson also saw developmental value in establishing connections with others in early adulthood. Calling the developmental stages eras, Levinson's Seasons of Life theory of adult development describes a transitional period of exploration between ages 17 and 22. During this time, young adults modify their relationships with friends and family to develop the independence needed to progress into the era of early adulthood. Levinson's early adulthood era is characterized by pursuing life goals, such as leaving the parents' home, as well as starting a career and marriage. Levinson suggests that the path to achieving these goals can be facilitated by a close mentoring relationship with a role model who can guide and support the young adult's emerging independence and maturity, particularly in the workplace. Like Vaillant's, Levinson's theory was originally based on a longitudinal study of adult men. With his collaborator and wife Judy, however, Levinson later conducted a smaller-scale study on a cohort of career women born between 1936 and 1947 to examine the validity of his theory as applied to women. After her husband's death, Judy Levinson published the results of this work in The Seasons of a Woman's Life, 1996. While the study found many similarities in men's and women's transitions and eras of early adulthood, It found women faced greater obstacles in reconciling education, career, and family responsibilities. They also met with greater gender discrimination in their career development, and they found it more difficult to establish effective mentoring relationships in the workplace, because available mentors were usually men. As a result, many of the women studied described their husbands as their primary source of career mentoring and support, exhibiting a more direct link between the developmental tasks of intimacy and career development than their men counterparts did. While Daniel Levinson was framing his theory of adult development in men, writer Gail Sheehy was researching the lives of men and women in their 20s, 30s, and 40s to explore the reality of adult development in the 20th century. In the book Passages, 1976, based on her work, Sheehy colorfully mapped out the decades of adulthood. Tryout 20s, age 18 to 30, is a provisional adulthood where there is room to explore options during a prolonged adolescence, when young people are still defined by others' expectations. Turbulent 30s, age 30 to 40, is the first experience of true adulthood, in which individuals take on real adult roles and responsibility and challenge the idealistic aspirations of early adulthood. Flourishing 40s, age 40 to 50, begins a second adulthood, fueled by a midlife crisis during which adults take stock of the goals and achievements of their first adulthood and attempt to realign their priorities to confidently and optimistically pursue meaningful goals in the second half of life. The book was wildly popular for Sheehy's engaging and relatable insights, and was eventually named by the Library of Congress as one of the most influential books of its time. 20 years later, Sheehy published the follow-up, New Passages, 1995, in which she more carefully examined the latter half of adulthood from her own perspective as an older adult. In this sequel, Sheehy noted that societal and cultural changes had created noticeable cohort differences in the developmental experience of adults from different generations, and that earlier conceptions of the stages of adulthood were outdated. She rejected the one-size-fits-all description of adult development that she and others had earlier endorsed, instead drawing attention to the way longer lifespans create increased opportunities for modern adults to, quote, customize our own life cycle in a way not possible decades earlier. Personality traits, evidence for stability and change. While the development of self in adulthood is, in part, an adaptation to the developmental tasks encountered at this stage of life, our personality is also inextricably tied to our sense of self. The five-factor model, FFM, is the most widely accepted framework psychologists use for describing individual differences in personality. With it, they can measure where individuals fall on a continuum of 5 traits: openness to experience, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, ocean. According to the originators of this model, these traits reflect biologically based tendencies that interact with environmental influences, such as culture, to predict how we will respond to life changes, such as the challenges of early adulthood. All this interaction culminates in our evolving sense of self. The 5-factor model views our individual personality traits as relatively stable predispositions, more likely to drive development rather than to develop themselves. Roberts and Davis, 2016. For example, during early adulthood, a person high in extroversion might explore careers that require regularly working with large groups of people. In this example, personality is influencing the developmental task of career exploration. Exploring careers well-suited to our individual personality traits in early adulthood is advisable, especially because research shows that the level of a given individual personality trait tends to remain stable over time relative to its level in others, a phenomenon known as rank order stability. That is, a person who demonstrates high levels of extroversion isn't likely to become very introverted over time. In fact, rank order stability increases during early adulthood, Ferguson, 2010. However, even if a person's ranking on a personality trait isn't likely to change substantially with age, that doesn't mean it cannot respond to life events with small but adaptive changes. A mean level change describes the extent to which the level of a personality trait can fluctuate over the lifespan. This fluctuation may occur in response to cultural changes, historical events, and role changes. For example, the developmental tasks of emerging adulthood may explain why research finds mean-level changes, such as an increase in emotional stability and conscientiousness during early adulthood. Roberts and Davis, 2016. According to the social investment theory of personality development, as young people begin to commit to adult roles, including romantic relationships and school and work responsibilities, Their personality responds with small but measurable increases in agreeableness, conscientious and openness, and decreases in neuroticism. Roberts et al., 2006-2016. Wagner et al., 2015. Schwabe et al., 2018. Schwabe et al., 2019. They may react to the responsibilities of school and work with an increase in the goal-oriented organization found in the trait of conscientiousness. This association has been supported cross-culturally. Blydorn et al., 2013. The increase or decrease of certain traits with age to effectively adapt to the demands of development is known as the maturity principle of personality development. Young adults may also draw on stable support systems, both internal and external, to facilitate their development. Personality has a remarkable ability to both direct the trajectory of developmental tasks in early adulthood and adapt to changing roles and responsibilities. It is like a sturdy rubber band that can support our sense of self while also stretching to meet our changing needs. Growing up in a predominantly white community in Tennessee, Logan Eggleston had gotten used to just ignoring racist comments. She dominated as a player on both her high school basketball and volleyball teams, and finished high school a year early. It wasn't until she became a college volleyball player at the University of Texas that Logan learned to embrace her identity and voice as a Black female student athlete. With the support and mentorship of her racially diverse team, Logan became the president of the Student Athlete Advisory Committee. In that role, she helped lead a student movement to have campus buildings renamed and statues replaced if they honored past racist leaders. She also worked with the UT Athletic Department and community members to create organizations that give back to diverse and underserved communities in Austin. In 2023, Logan was named the NCAA Woman of the Year for her achievements in academics, athletics, leadership, and community service, Kumar, 2022. Logan's experience reflects the significance that early adult transitions have on continued identity development after adolescence. Much like personality, our identity continues to evolve over time to adapt to changing roles and contexts, applying Marcia's identity framework. In much the same way that personality traits may mature in the context of the development of self, early adulthood appears to be an important time for identity consolidation. McLean and Syed, 2015, page 67. A concept consistent with Marcia's developmental identity typology. Rather than use Erikson's stage of identity versus confusion, Marcia, 1966, incorporated the processes Erikson described as prerequisite to identity attainment, exploration, and commitment, to identify 4 possible statuses of identity development. These statuses, introduced in Chapter 10, Social and Emotional Development in Adolescence, ages 12 to 18, are moratorium, foreclosure, diffusion, and achievement. Consistent with Erikson's theory regarding the necessity of both exploration and commitment to identity attainment, those in the identity achieved status were considered farthest along in their identity development. Those in moratorium were on the right path, whereas those who were diffused or foreclosed were considered developmentally ill-equipped for the tasks of early adulthood, Marcia, 1967. But even for those who enter adulthood having achieved a healthy sense of identity, part of the challenge of identity is to be able to integrate the various types of identity in a way that makes sense to the person's sense of self. For example, how can someone reconcile career ambition by taking a job in a city far away from home while also valuing ties to family? How might someone reconcile taking frequent flights while staying true to environmentalist principles? According to Marcia, 2002, the developmental tasks of early adulthood, such as completing higher education, leaving the parental home or hometown, finding love, and pursuing a career, can cause a disruption to identity. Adults must therefore periodically reflect on and reformulate their values and goals to regain equilibrium and the status of identity achievement. This ongoing process of role change and reflection can create cycles in which young adults experience moratorium achievement. Moratorium achievement, as they consider how new roles, responsibilities, and contexts may redefine their existing identity. Stephen et al., 1992. McLean and Syed, 2015. Given that the roles and contexts encountered in early adulthood may vary among individuals and even historically, it is not surprising that research attempting to track universal trajectories of identity development across early adulthood yields inconsistent results. Lewicks et al., 2013. Mannerstrom et al., 2017. For example, the number of adults with diffused identity status increases during economic recessions, when efforts to complete developmental tasks such as buying a home and finding employment may be hampered by broader economic conditions. Fajikov et al., 2010. And while finding employment in early adulthood does not predict consistent changes to a young adult's overall identity status, becoming a parent does predict an increase in overall identity commitment. Researchers suggest that, instead of trying to generalize patterns of general identity development, analyzing why and when adults experience changes to identity process and status within specific identity domains provides a clearer and more nuanced understanding of this part of young adulthood. Mannerstrom et al., 2019. Identity in context. The value of considering the interactions of a person's identity domains is reflected in the intersectional approach to psychology. Civil rights advocate Kimbrel Crenshaw, 1991, coined the term intersectionality as a framework for understanding the way people simultaneously experience multiple aspects of their identity and their associated privileges or discrimination. For example, a Korean American woman's life experience is different from a biracial American woman's, producing racial variations in the experience of womanhood. Recognizing intersectional identity especially matters when one or more of a person's identity domains are marginalized. Goffman, 1963, asserts that people with stigmatized identities may feel burdened with the additional work of impression management as they constantly try to offset negative stereotypes during their daily interactions. This attempt to manage others' expectations across changing social contexts can inhibit a person's perceived freedom of choice in their personal development and hamper their identity development. Erickson, 1968. When considered in context, identity development is just as much about who you do want to be and be perceived as who you do not want to be or be seen as. McLean et al., 2021. Marcus and Nurius, 1986. As you read this section, consider how the domains of ethnicity and race, gender and sexuality, and religion intersect to create varied developmental experiences for people as they begin adulthood in a variety of social contexts. Ethno-racial identity. As ethnic and racial diversity within the United States increase, young adults are more likely to encounter individuals different from themselves. Menchaca et al., 2023, Figure 12.10. Aspects of the self, such as personality and identity, help us to understand and integrate these diverse social encounters into our personal narrative or life story. McAdams, 1995. An individual's ethno-racial identity is an umbrella term used to capture both racial and ethnic aspects of our identity. Personality psychologist Robert M. Sellers asserts that, within our developing life experiences, we often find opportunities for aspects of our ethno-racial identity to change. Some of these aspects are identity salience, meaning the relevance of our identity within a given situation, identity centrality, or the importance of our identity to our overall sense of self, and identity regard, which expresses how positively or negatively we feel about our identity. Sellers et al., 1998. Quinn and Chaudhar, 2009. Yip et al., 2019. Ethno-racial identity is more salient for ethnic and racial minorities, who are more likely than their white counterparts to report instances of differential treatment based on their ethno-racial identity. Consequently, in emerging adulthood, those who identify with minority ethnic or racial groups are more likely to be in the identity moratorium and identity achieved statuses regarding their ethno-racial identity than white young adults, who are less likely to have explored or achieved this aspect of their identity. Syed and Wong, 2014. Compared to middle-aged and older adults, young adults in general are less likely to have explored or achieved their ethno-racial identity. They show more transition in this identity status than older adults. Mailer, 2022. Intersections and contexts. Exploring Black Girl Magic in First-Generation College Women. In 2021, Boston Globe columnist Janae Osterhelt wrote, "Black women are not mythical, nor superhuman. Our magic is in our realness, our love, and the way we rally around one another." Osterhelt, 2021. But what happens to that magic when Black women who are first-generation college students enter predominantly white college institutions? According to researchers Quaisha Williams, Brittany Williams, and Lamesha Brown, the resulting experience can be one of hyper-invisibility in an environment where they may not have family or community connections. To make the experience of these women more visible, the researchers conducted in-depth, semi-structured interviews to learn and share their stories. Having grown up in Black communities, Many of the women described experiencing an increased salience of their Black identity, both within their predominantly white educational institution and back home, which caused some to code switch, alternate between different conversational or communication styles, as they moved back and forth between the two environments. Biology major Dontavia reports, "It's just I always have to change how I speak, so much to where I feel like I speak different, because when I go home, my friends tell me I sound different. They tell me I'm talking different. To the point where it's like I've become comfortable with doing it, because I'm so used to it." In addition to experiencing racist microaggressions, these women also intently felt the impact of their identity as first-generation college students. They recounted the risks of navigating typical college experiences, such as seeking out financial aid or internships, without the family network support that benefited many of their peers. The researchers noted that the self-protective coping mechanisms employed by these women to combat and resist oppression requires a hypervigilance that increases their risk for anxiety and physical health problems. Williams and colleagues advocated for better campus support services to meet the needs of first-generation Black college women and concluded that, in the meantime, their persistence and resilience is, at its core, an example of Black girl magic. Williams et al., 2022. Gender and sexual identity. Cultural norms often blur gender identity and sexual identity, though they differ, and assume that these identities are dichotomous, meaning someone is either male or female, straight or gay. The development of gender and sexual identities is also often misunderstood as a linear process, from confusion to achievement, with no room to pause, question, and revisit identity as young adults encounter new roles and environments. Morgan, 2016. For many, leaving home in early adulthood prompts continued exploration of the intersection of ethnic, gender, and sexual identity. As Ty, a 21-year-old transgender man, explains, "I got to college and met other trans people who actually had reasonably happy lives, successful lives, and from there, that kind of clicked. So I think there was early understanding, then a period of repression, and then acceptance in college." Harith et al., 2020. Adults must often grapple with ways to flexibly explore their gender and sexual identity within a cultural context that assumes these aspects of ourselves are predetermined and don't warrant ongoing exploration. As a result, those who are straight are less likely to have explored this aspect of their identity than those who are LGBTQ+, because heterosexuality conforms to heteronormative cultural expectations. Morgan, 2016. The development of gender and sexual identity can intersect with ethno-racial identity to produce a wide variety of developmental experiences. Figure 12.11. Scholars argue this intersection has not been adequately addressed in identity research, especially for those who occupy minority identities such as LGBTQ+ persons and ethno-racial minorities. Cerezo et al., 2020. Compared to past generations, modern LGBTQ+ young adults are more likely to have explored their sexual identity earlier in life and come out at a younger age, but they still may experience marginalization and discrimination as they approach social clock milestones of adulthood, such as marriage and parenthood. Russell and Fish, 2019, Morgan, 2016. Black and Latino sexual minorities report achieving milestones in the development of their sexual identity, such as self-realization of same-sex attraction, earlier than white sexual minorities. A 2015 study of LGBTQ+ Latino women found that family support was the most important predictor of their decision to come out to others outside their family. Pastrana, 2015. These findings were replicated in a 2020 study of Black and Latina LGBTQ+ women, who reported that worries about how their gender and sexual identity would affect their relationship with their family and their family's social standing reduced their comfort in coming out to others. Cerezo et al., 2020. Religious identity. The most common religious affiliation in the United States is Christianity. However, the percentage of those reporting a Christian religious identity has dropped from 90% in the early 1970s to 63% in 2021. This change has been driven, in part, by adults who were raised in Christian families but no longer identify with the religion by the end of young adulthood. The number of U.S. adults raised as unaffiliated with a particular religion also increased, from 5% 50 years ago to 29% today. The percentage of adults identifying with non-Christian religions has remained relatively unchanged during this time. Pew Research Center, 2022. So what drives changes in religious or spiritual identity with age? During childhood and adolescence, many follow the spiritual beliefs and practices of their families. Mahoney, 2021. The transition to adulthood brings new roles, social connections, and contexts that may prompt more intentional reflection on spiritual beliefs and whether they answer questions about life, purpose, and direction. Gale et al., 2023. When asked why they no longer identify with their family religion, many young people reported feeling out of place in a religion that did not align with their other values or priorities. Hardy and Longo, 2021. This mismatch may accompany the development of a person's worldview, as they spend more time outside the parents' home and influence and encounter new people and perspectives. While overall religiosity, level of interest, belief, and practice of worship does not change for most people as they progress into early adulthood, young adults engage in a more explorative and information-seeking approach to their religious identity than adolescents do. Gerba et al., 2022. About 15% of adults experience a decline in religiosity during early adulthood, 10% an increase, and 10% an initial decline, followed by a return to their religious beliefs during the early adulthood, middle adulthood transition. When she began college 10 years ago, Emily decided to stay at home and attend part-time as a commuter to save money. Now graduated with a computer science degree and working full-time as a software developer, Emily is 28 and still living at home. She has a supportive group of friends she can talk to about her career and personal life, and she is looking to buy a condo with the money she has saved over the last 10 years with the support of her family. Emily's story illustrates the complex interaction of our dependence on others, with the early adulthood tasks associated with personal development and independence. In this section, we examine more specifically some of the interpersonal relationships important to the development of young adults, including friends and family. The significance of social context. According to self-determination theory, our success and well-being are maximized when we balance our needs for autonomy, competence, and relatedness. Ryan and Daichi, 2000. These aspects of developmental well-being are interrelated and can influence each other in complex ways. For example, a new job might bring financial independence, which increases your autonomy, and opportunities for professional development that increase your competence. But it might also require you to relocate or spend less time with friends and family, which decreases your relatedness. So just as we must revisit and recalibrate aspects of the self to fit the developmental tasks of early adulthood, so too must we renegotiate our relationships with friends and family in the context of our goals and emerging independence. However, the cultural context of these relationships has changed. Today's emerging adults are more likely than in the past to experience developmental transitions unrelated to family. They are deferring marriage and children in favor of personal development goals such as obtaining higher education, starting careers, and leaving home. Evidence suggests that friends might be more influential supports during these transitions than family. Fiore et al., 2020. At the same time, a greater number of young adults today live at home with their parents or receive financial support from them. A recent poll found that 65% of parents have provided financial support to their young adult children within the last year, averaging $718 a month. Rawson et al., 2024. The role of friends. Summarizing his review of the research on friendship development, Jeffrey Arnett concluded that friendships change over the course of emerging adulthood, and such changes are more closely linked to life transitions, e.g., transition to college, starting a career, changing romantic status, transition to parenthood, than to age-related developmental changes. Perhaps changes in friendships also reflect changing needs in terms of support for developmental tasks. Arnett, 2015, page 224. Change here can refer to changes in the number of friends we have, who they are, and the qualities, functions, and outcomes of our friendships. Arnett's conclusion is consistent with Selman's classic theory of friendship development, 1980, which asserts that friendships in emerging adulthood evolve to autonomous interdependence. In this stage, friends appreciate and respect each other's individuality and identity, but also rely on each other for the support needed to achieve their own goals. For example, when asked about personal goals such as academic success or physical fitness, college students indicated they would rather spend time with friends who help them to achieve those goals than friends who actually share the characteristics they hope to acquire. Slaughter and Gardner, 2011. Aaron et al., 2022. In other words, friendships in early adulthood. Research finds that young adult friendships can promote and create interconnections among the three elements of self-determined behavior: relatedness, autonomy, and competence. Figure 12.12. Young adults who perceive that their friends will be there to help them when they need it have higher self-esteem. Langhite and Poulin, 2024. Stronger friendship attachments in emerging adulthood are also positively associated with progress on developmental tasks, such as identity exploration, taking on responsibility for others, and becoming more independent. Schneiders et al., 2018. Self-determination also predicts positive well-being, and close and supportive friendships in early adulthood reduce feelings of loneliness and increase happiness. Demir et al., 2015. Nicolaisen and Thorson, 2017. Friendships become deeper in early adulthood, characterized by increasing intimacy and trust, and they often provide more social support than family during times of change. Arnett, 2007. Lee and Goldstein, 2016. Mything et al., 2017. Schneiders et al., 2018. Friends confide in and seek advice from each other about their dating and sex lives, which they might not be comfortable discussing with family members. Carlson, 2014. Tagliabue et al., 2018. Assel et al., 2022. Friendship networks also expand in young adulthood. Werzeus et al., 2013. For example, many first-year college students rely more on their friends from home during their first semester. But research finds that making new friends within the new roles and settings of early adulthood increases a sense of belonging and promotes long-term well-being. Paul and Breyer, 2001. Strayhorn, 2018. Patel and Plowman, 2024. High-quality and supportive relationships with friends during early adulthood are predictive of psychological and physical health, regardless of race or ethnicity. Schgotti et al., 2021. However, the social networks of those who are white and educated include a larger proportion of friends than among those who are black or have less education. Ajrush et al., 2024. People of color are more likely to have kin friends, meaning family members, such as cousins who function in friendship roles. Friendships tend to form within the settings of our daily routines, such as school, work, and community, and the college experience in particular may expand the proportion of friends, compared to family, in a person's social network. Ballard, 2019. Plummer et al., 2016. Figure 12.13. However, college students from low socioeconomic backgrounds often feel like outsiders in a college setting and are unsure how to get involved in campus activities where they might form supportive new friendships. Rubin, 2012. Petit et al., 2015. In fact, having friends with higher perceived socioeconomic status actually increased feelings of incompetence in low socioeconomic students. McGinnis et al., 2019. In contrast, young adults who form close friendships with someone of a different racial or ethnic identity report that, while the depth and intimacy of these friendships took longer to build than with adults of their own identity, the resulting closeness increased their understanding of diverse perspectives. Young adults are more likely than middle-aged adults to have a close friendship with someone of a different racial or ethnic identity, and being a person of color and having a higher education increases the likelihood of having a cross-ethnic friendship. Plummer et al., 2016. The role of family. The transition into adult responsibilities and independence can be challenging. In fact, since 2016, the Swedish government has offered programs to support mental health, employment, engaged citizenship, and other important needs during emerging adulthood. The European Commission, 2024. However, in the United States, families remain the primary support for the young adult transition, providing on average 10% of their income to their young adult children. Whiteman et al., 2012. While some young adults report feeling guilty about their reliance on this financial support, most are comfortable if the assistance is framed as temporary and supporting a longer-term goal of adult independence. In this section, we explore the way young adults and their families navigate this balance in their relationship as children launch into adulthood. It depends. How grandparents inform our lives. While grandparents' impact on the lives of younger grandchildren has been well documented, less is known about their continuing role during the transitions of early adulthood. Abigail Steffen, a researcher in Clemson University's Institute for Engaged Aging, surveyed young adults to learn more about the quality of their relationships with their grandparents and the continued influence of those relationships on the decisions young adults make about their lives. Participants often felt closer to some grandparents than to others. The past role of a grandparent as a childhood caregiver did not predict these differences. Instead, they were sometimes the result of larger family dynamics or individual personalities. But respondents also tended to feel closest to grandparents who had lived nearby during their childhood. Young adults reported that as they got older, they began to, quote, take more ownership of those relationships, rather than relying on their parents or grandparents to manage them. Young adults whose relationships with their grandparents were positive said they now take more initiative to stay in touch via text, phone calls, and visits, especially if they moved for jobs or college. However, for some young adults, this meant making the decision to end contentious relationships with grandparents they perceived as negatively affecting family well-being and cohesion. Still, others said adulthood had given them the perspective to realize that grandparents are imperfect individuals who serve as examples of both flawed and admirable behavior and values. Overall, Dr. Stefan concluded that, despite variation in the structure and substance of grandparent relationships held by participants, a level of diversity that is expected both within and across family systems, the acknowledgement of their grandparents' influence was interspersed throughout the interviews. All participants were conscious of the impact their grandparents have on their values and subsequent decisions regarding careers, life partners, child rearing, and perspectives on functioning in the world. Stefan, 2024. Leaving home. In the United States, a person can expect to move almost 12 times during their lifetime. Adults between 20 and 29 move the most because many of the developmental tasks of young adulthood, such as job changes and the achievement of financial independence, require relocating. Mariotti, 2022, figure 12.14. For many young adults, the decision about whether, when, and why to move from their parents' home is affected by culture, education, financial considerations, and responsibilities. Culture and ethnicity can influence the decision, as can the parent-child relationship. Among immigrants in Canada, for example, Chinese families, Southern European families, including Italian and Greek, and South Asian families, including Indian and Pakistani, cited marriage or cohabiting with a romantic partner as the most expected/acceptable reason for their young adult child to leave the family home. Among South Asian families, adult sons are often expected to continue living in the parental home after marriage, as part of a multi-generational household, which is more common in families with collectivistic values. Mitchell and Wister, 2015. British immigrant families cited educational and employment opportunities as the most expected reasons for adult children to leave their parents' home. Figure 12.15. In the United States, ethnicity, age, income, and gender are all predictors of the likelihood that a young adult will live at home. Shrigley, 2023. White young adults are the least likely group to do so, likely explained in part by cultural norms that prioritize individuality and independence. However, race and ethnicity are also tied to socioeconomic status and educational opportunities, and young adults who live with their parents are more likely to have low income, difficulty paying bills, and little to no savings. They are also less likely to be college educated. In the preceding image, we saw that young men are also more likely to live with their parents than young women, most likely because young women are more likely to be married and college educated, developmental milestones that provide reasons and means for living independently. When young adults do move from their parents' home, they usually don't go far. 60% live within 10 miles of their childhood home, and 80% within 100 miles, though the distance varies by race, ethnicity, and parental income. Hendren et al., 2022. Sprung-Kaiser et al., 2022. These group differences are again most likely influenced by differing cultural priorities placed on staying near and being engaged with family, pursuing higher education, and career goals. For example, among the low-income regions of Appalachia, white young adults leave their hometown at much lower rates than the national average. Hendren et al., 2022. Proximity between adult children and their parents is associated with increased contact. Dean et al., 2016. This contact helps promote what family sociologist Vernon Bengtson called intergenerational solidarity. Bengtson and Schrader, 1982. A closeness among family generations promoted by frequent interaction, expressions of affection, alignment of values and beliefs, provision of help, proximity, and shared family norms and traditions. After leaving home, the effect of a child moving out varies among cultures, as well as among individual families. Figure 12.16. For example, U.S. children and their parents typically report a decrease in conflict once the young adult moves out. Morgan et al., 2010. Fang et al., 2021. While Portuguese parents report experiencing greater agitation following the move. Mendonca and Fontaine, 2013. These differing emotional reactions are tied to different cultural values. White and U.S.-born young adults are more likely to view the role of family as supporting the aspirations and advancement of young adult children. However, ethnic minority young adults and those from immigrant families are more likely to feel a generational interdependence in which help flows in all directions among siblings, parents, grandparents, and adult children. Swartz et al., 2017, page 27. Most U.S. parents describe their relationship with their young adult children as very good or excellent, staying in contact by phone or text at least several times a week. Minkin et al., 2024. They are satisfied with their level of involvement in the lives of their young adult children and continue to provide emotional support, especially from mothers to daughters. Young adult children continue to seek guidance from their parents, especially on career, health, and finances, and the most common source of disagreement is the young adult's financial decisions. Perhaps most transformative is that many parents feel they now truly know each other beyond their roles as parent and child. Minkin et al., 2024. U.S.-born young adults, in particular, desire equitable relationships with their parents, like that of close friends, figure 12.17. In fact, many young adults describe a parent as their best friend. Jake, an attorney from Chicago, says he talks to his family 2 to 3 times per week and solves his problems by committee. Swartz et al., 2017, page 34. Rather than comparing their relationships to friendships, young adults from immigrant families describe their parents as more directive and focus on family sociability and solidarity, generated by family gatherings, traditions, and celebrations. Some parents may be tempted to make life easier for their young adult children by hovering over their day-to-day activities and decisions, even from afar. But young adults who perceive their parents as controlling or manipulative are more likely to feel anxious and indecisive when making choices and commitments. Lewix et al., 2007, Lueb et al., 2018. Young adults and their parents must make space in their relationship for the value of trial and error. Even at this stage of life, the family can still serve as a secure base that provides young adults with the confidence and security to explore new people, places, and roles as they step into the adult world. 6 years after graduating college, Sam finds his job as a design engineer very satisfying. He can apply his degree in mechanical engineering, works from home 3 days a week, and has the autonomy to implement creative ideas. However, his pathway to the job was challenging. His first job out of college, as a quality assurance engineer, required him to work from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. 5 days a week on the floor of a manufacturing plant. It was a noisy environment with low pay, but drawing on his community service experience volunteering for Habitat for Humanity, Sam impressed his supervisors with his adaptability, teamwork, and communication skills. Sam appreciates how far he has come during his early adult career and still looks for opportunities for continuing education and professional development to keep the doors open for future career mobility. Sam's story illustrates how the education and work trajectories of young adults can be both challenging and rewarding. In this section, we will consider the influences on and outcomes of decisions regarding continuing education and employment. Trajectories. Developmental scientists often refer to life's developmental trajectories. Elder et al., 2015. A trajectory is a predicted pathway of development, and it is usually determined by our behaviors within our context. For example, if your community and family are able to support a college education, standards that define your context, and you earn good grades in high school and choose to go to college in early adulthood, which defines your behavior, this interaction increases the likelihood that you will complete a college degree and earn a higher income, establishing your trajectory. As the social clock of emerging and early adulthood has become more elongated and flexible in modern society, there is now space for many more possible developmental trajectories during this stage of life. Setterson and Ray, 2010. Eliasson et al., 2015, page 207. Figure 12.18. Young adults perceive that personal accountability, independent decision-making, and financial independence are what makes someone an adult, and the context from which they step into the adult world create a variety of ways to achieve these priorities. Sharon, 2016. Post-high school pathways. College enrollment rates are higher for the most recent cohorts of young adults than for previous generations, but since 2010 enrollment has remained relatively steady, with about 40% of 18 to 24-year-olds enrolling in a 2- or 4-year institution. National Center for Education Statistics, 2024. That means that for more than half of young adults, college is not the pathway. Other pathways include starting a family, undertaking vocational training, accepting full-time employment, enlisting in military service, and signing on for volunteer work or political activism. Figure 12.19. Many young adults credit community service opportunities with sparking their interest in a particular field and providing a purpose-driven career pathway. However, most volunteerism and civic engagement among young adults occurs in sporadic episodes. Motulsky et al., 2020. Most young adults express interest in community service but do not regularly participate, citing a lack of time given the increasing responsibilities of early adulthood. Swartz et al., 2017. Raylick et al., 2020. Female and Black young adults are most likely to volunteer their time for community service, but overall, community service participation rates decline following high school. Political engagement and election participation increase, however, particularly among Black young adults. Raylick et al., 2020. Figure 12.20. The influence of context. Many factors interact to influence the educational and vocational pathways young adults choose after high school, including family and community background, socioeconomic status, gender, and race. Those from rural areas often face hard choices because they are less likely to find many education and employment opportunities close to home. Fenton et al., 2023. Half of all first-year college students at public institutions come from within 50 miles of campus, but education deserts, communities with no nearby college or university, are more common in rural areas. Stolzenberg et al., 2020. Hillman and Weichman, 2016. Young adults from families with low socioeconomic status, SES, see the greatest earnings benefits from a college degree. But parents and community members who did not attend college may be less likely to see college as a realistic or valuable choice, and rural young adults are less likely to be encouraged by their families and teachers to prepare for or pursue a college education. Healy, 2017. Bune et al., 2012. Many young adults in rural communities choose instead to seek employment in local jobs that are more familiar, accessible, and close to family, rather than investing time and money in an advanced education or professional relocation that may not yield worthwhile occupational results. Corbett, 2016. Many also cite obligations to family or family property that keep them attached to their hometown. Wilson et al., 2017. Massey, 2020. Young adults who remain in their hometown communities are more likely to experience earlier transitions to other adult roles, such as full-time employment, marriage, and parenthood. Fenton, 2023. While these early transitions are predictive of decreased substance use, increased financial independence, and life satisfaction for these young adults, early marriage and parenthood decrease the likelihood of college attendance or degree completion and predict a lower household income. Maggs et al., 2012. Monahan, 2020. Economic pressures have also made it difficult for many rural areas to provide living conditions of sufficient quality for young adults to stay or to return home after college. Motulsky et al., 2020. School closures, decreased property values, poverty, unemployment, low wages, and a scarcity of healthcare providers have resulted in a declining rural population in the United States, driven in part by the exodus of young people from those areas and toward urban or suburban areas that offer more opportunities. Economic Research Service, 2017. Massey, 2020. Those who do leave rural hometowns to advance their education or career are more likely to come from white families with higher SES and higher levels of education. Brandon C., 2010. Brooks and Redlin, 2009. Carr and Kefalas, 2011. Race and ethnicity also predict different decisions regarding employment and education. Figure 12.21. Family care priorities, financial obstacles, and discrimination can dissuade young Black and Hispanic adults with high occupational aspirations from relocating to pursue those goals. Brooks and Redlin, 2009. Black young adults are also more likely to feel disconnected from settings that might provide developmental pathways, such as school, the workplace, and the military. Fenton et al., 2023, in part because they are more likely than white young adults to face interpersonal and institutional discrimination there. Hope et al., 2015. However, Black young adults are more likely than their white socioeconomic peers to complete a college degree. Carlson, 2019. The intersection of race and gender identity also produces variation in trajectories for young adults, partly because young men anticipate better prospects for stable, well-paying jobs without a college education in stereotypically masculine vocations such as plumbing or construction. Fewer men attend college than women. This gender gap is narrower among Black young adults. 37% of men attend college versus 44% of women. Then among white, 40% of men, 50% of women. And Hispanic young adults, 33% of men, 44% of women. Fry, 2023. White and minority young adults enlist in the military at comparable rates, but women are much less likely to do so than men. Barroso, 2019. White and Hispanic young adults are more likely to marry earlier than Black or Asian young adults, but Black women are more likely than white women to work, be the primary breadwinner in their household, and have caregiving responsibilities. Payne, 2019. Weller, 2019. The transition into adulthood can be particularly challenging for young adults with disabilities. Interviews with young people with a range of disabilities, their caregivers and service providers, reveals several barriers to participating in typical adult life. Stewart et al. 2014. Also 2023. Pace. Life for emerging adults is influenced not only by a social clock, but also by busy schedules and fast-paced interactions that can leave little room for those who need a flexible pace to accomplish their goals. Complexity and literacy. Changing procedures and jargon-filled instructions can be confusing for those trying to accomplish even everyday tasks, such as reading a recipe or putting gas in the car. Stigma. In a culture that values independence in early adulthood, it can be difficult for a young adult with disabilities to ask for help and support. It is especially challenging to overcome either-or thinking that assumes someone either can do everything by themselves or needs constant supervision, with no gray area in between. Many families are understandably reluctant to give their young adults more autonomy within such an uncertain landscape. Young adults with disabilities were often more willing than their families to pave their own way, despite the lack of clear directions or guaranteed outcomes. And providing opportunities for young adults with disabilities to exercise more independence can also reduce stigma within the community. The success of these young people requires early, careful, and customized planning that promotes collaboration among available disability services and the family, and that accommodates the strengths and limitations of the young adult within their desired future. Stewart et al. 2014. An individualized and holistic approach can help facilitate the development of life skills, opportunities, and support that will improve a young adult's quality of life in domains such as independent living, employment, education, social life, and community involvement. Also, 2023. College considerations. College is not the only or best path for everyone, and for those who choose it, not a one-size-fits-all experience. For first-generation college students, the transition to college life can be a culture shock. While many such students begin college with pride and determination, the environment can feel uncomfortable or overwhelming as they navigate unfamiliar social networks and intimidating institutional policies and procedures. Matulski et al. 2020. After high school, some students choose to do a gap year to gain valuable personal and professional development before beginning college, through participation in immersive experiences such as community service work. Other students combine military service and college education by joining the Reserve Officers Training Corps, ROTC, Figure 12.22. In exchange for an 8-year service commitment following graduation, the ROTC offers scholarships to adults interested in gaining military service training while enrolled as full-time college students, U.S. Army, ND. Next, we look at pathways through college and outcomes for those who enroll. Pathways. Statistics show significant differences in how and when young adults complete their undergraduate degrees. Monahan, 2020. These differences often result from socioeconomic inequities that can present delays and interruptions for students with lower SES. Often driven by the need to find affordable, local, and part-time enrollment options, they are more likely to begin their college education as part-time students at a community college, a pathway associated with a lower likelihood of degree completion than full-time enrollment at a 4-year institution. Students with lower SES are also more likely to be employed full-time, get married, and become parents during emerging adulthood, which often necessitates part-time enrollment and lowers degree completion rates, especially for women. Research on college enrollment patterns identified 2 primary groups of students, labeled rapid completers, 38%, and marginal college goers, 43%. Rapid completers enrolled and completed their degree before age 25. They were more likely to come from college-educated families with high SES. They also had the highest employment rates, part-time during college and full-time after graduation, with a median annual income of $94,000 during adulthood. Marginal college-goers attended part-time and for short spells, with a 6% degree completion rate during early adulthood. They were more likely to be employed full-time and married during their college enrollment, Monahan 2020. Working part-time is associated with achieving better college outcomes, including greater campus engagement, leadership and skill development, and social networking, especially for first-generation students. Pike et al., 2008, Salisbury et al., 2012, Nunez and Sansone, 2016. However, working more than 20 hours a week is associated with a lower GPA and lower college completion rate. Davis, 2023. Outcomes. Young adults who enroll in college usually do so to get better job opportunities, including higher earning and purpose-driven careers. Egan et al., 2013. Johnson, 2023. If higher earnings are the goal, data suggest that completing an internship or study abroad experience during college is predictive of higher earnings in the workplace. Wolniak and Engberg, 2019. And while most graduates believe their education was a good investment, if they had to do it over, more than half say they would choose a different major to be better positioned to pursue their passions and better job opportunities. Johnson, 2023. Switching majors, as 30% of students do, can increase a student's likelihood of graduating, especially when done within 3 years of starting and with the help of campus career resources. National Center for Education Statistics, 2017. Crawford Sigler, 2020. The benefits of choosing the right major continue after college. Adult job satisfaction and commitment have been found to be predicted by perceived alignment between college major and field of employment. Wolniak and Pascarella, 2005. Wolniak and Engberg, 2019, regardless of income. However, even if a graduate enters the workforce in a career exactly matching their major, chances are they won't stay in that specific field over the course of their career. Roberts Wesleyan College, 2020. Fox, 2022. Career exploration. It is estimated that the average adult will change careers, not just jobs, 5 to 7 times in their life. Roberts Wesleyan College, 2020. In 2022 alone, 61% of young adults in the workforce who had quit their job within the last year said they wanted to change their field of work or occupation. Fox, 2022. In fact, some of the most satisfying jobs for emerging adults might not even exist yet. When most of today's working adults were young, there was no such thing as social media, let alone a job as a social media manager. As technology continues to evolve, so will occupations in this and many other fields. Career preparation and readiness. According to career expert Vicky Salemi, the key to professional readiness is to develop transferable skills, including communication, problem-solving, and collaboration, and to emphasize those skills on your resume and in interviews. Fox, 2022. Employers say they prefer applicants with active and applied learning experiences, which apprenticeships or internships can provide. Flaherty, 2021. 2/3 of employers also say they want adaptable employees with good communication skills, which can be developed as a result of teamwork opportunities in military service or study abroad experiences. If you are looking for a career that provides opportunity to learn new skills, face new challenges, and serve a purpose to others, completing community service or civic engagement experiences is the best predictor of those outcomes. Such experiences also develop problem-solving skills, teamwork, and work ethic, among the top abilities employers seek. Gray, 2024. Career goals. A cross-cultural meta-analysis of the priorities influencing the career goals of young people found that they were influenced by extrinsic factors, such as the potential income or accessibility of the job. Intrinsic motivations, such as personal interest or opportunities for professional development, and interpersonal influences, such as social responsibility or family influence. Those coming from families with more collectivistic cultural values, such as in India and South Korea, were more likely to be influenced by extrinsic factors and interpersonal influences. U.S. job seekers, on the other hand, were more likely to be guided by intrinsic motivations. Akosa Twumasi et al., 2018. Developing a vocational identity in early adulthood requires exploring the way our career goals relate to aspects of ourself, such as interests, values, and abilities. Engaging in this exploration is predictive of job motivation, performance, and flexibility. Colquitt et al., 2000. Rowald, 2007. Kim et al., 2023. Research on college students shows a general increase in exploration and commitment during emerging adulthood. Kim et al., 2023. Facilitated by aspects of personality such as conscientiousness, openness, internal locus of control, and self-efficacy. Lee et al., 2023. Young adults who are more satisfied with their career trajectories credit supportive mentorship from family, educators, and work colleagues, as well as their own proactive and strategic career exploration during school and in early job experiences. Swartz et al., 2017. Figure 12.23. Like other social developments, a young adult's career trajectory reflects the interaction of context and behavior. According to Donald Super's lifespan theory of career development, our career trajectory starts as early as childhood and evolves throughout adulthood as it interacts with other developmental roles and tasks. Super, 1990. In adolescence and emerging adulthood, the focus is exploration. However, in early to middle adulthood, the priority shifts to establishment, which includes committing to and advancing within a career in ways that consider the relative value of other roles such as family, peers, school, and the community. For some young adults, the career establishment process may focus more on taking on more responsibility and advancing within successful or good jobs or careers. Young adults describe good jobs as full-time and stable positions that are personally rewarding, allow autonomy and responsibility at work, present opportunities to serve or mentor others, and offer generous employee compensation and benefits, such as work from home, healthcare, and vacation time. Those who find themselves in bad jobs may be more focused on changing jobs or careers because their work offers insufficient compensation and benefits, inadequate training, little feeling of accomplishment or empowerment, and unsafe, unfair, or degrading conditions. Swartz et al., 2017. As with other trajectories, the context from which people emerge into adulthood has a big influence on the likelihood of finding themselves in a good or bad job. Those in good jobs were more likely to come from privileged socioeconomic backgrounds, which provided support for advanced education and professional development experiences like study abroad or unpaid internships and safety nets to buffer them against setbacks. However, young adults also report behaviors that may have increased the likelihood of success in career establishment. For example, those in good jobs often approach their career with a more developmental and strategic mindset, using entry-level jobs to develop skills, expertise, and professional connections that help them advance to more satisfying and challenging positions. Young adults in bad jobs are more likely to develop a learned helplessness, which undermines a sense of direction or agency in their career development. Swartz et al., 2017. Often overwhelmed by the responsibilities of full-time job, education, and family, these adults dream of better work, but are often unsure how to realize those dreams and lack available tools, support, or mentorship to guide them. Work-life balance. As young adults take on more responsibilities, they must balance obligations at work or school with other priorities. Finding this balance does not require giving equal attention to everything or doing it all. Rather, work-life balance is the arrangement that allows a person to spend the desired amount of time on each of the activities that matter to them, such as work, leisure, education, and caregiving. Dang et al., 2024. The amount of time allocated to various life activities may be unequal and change according to needs. Writer McAlery describes the value of seeing adult life balance as a scale that can tilt toward the activities that most need our attention, including as our priorities change over time. McAlery, 2017. College students report typically spending the most time per week, approximately 30 hours, on educational activities like attending class and studying. And while frequently exhibiting signs of burnout and exhaustion, young adults, including those who are caregivers for aging parents or younger siblings, report achieving a moderate level of balance between work and other priorities. Dang et al., 2024. Young adults with an internal locus of control are more likely to use active, problem-focused coping strategies to manage a broad range of developmental challenges, which can result in higher self-esteem, feelings of competence, and life satisfaction. Kurtovich et al., 2018. Singh and Chowdhury, 2014. Some researchers have noted that more recently, young adults are more willing to advocate for their work-life balance, screening jobs for or directly asking their employers to provide increased flexibility such as remote work, flexible hours, and time for self-care. Lee and Diller, 2023. Life hacks. Developing work-life balance early in your career. The American Psychological Association offers these active coping strategies for developing and maintaining work-life balance during early adulthood. DeAngelis, 2017. Plan your tasks at home and at work in advance. That includes daily, weekly, and even long-term career planning. Communicate. Talk with your family, friends, romantic partners, and work colleagues. Don't expect others to intuitively know what you need and want. Ask for and offer help. Set boundaries. Know when to politely say no so that you are able to give adequate time to the tasks already on your plate and take care of your priorities and needs. Don't give 110%. It's too early to get burned out. Give yourself and others the grace to sometimes fail or be good enough. Life balance in early adulthood relates not only to whether a person is able to satisfactorily divide their time among adult responsibilities, but also to the way they prioritize the sequence of developmental challenges. So far in this chapter, we have addressed the early adulthood challenges to develop the self, identity, relationships with friends and family, and education and vocational pathways. In the last section, we will discuss how young adults' romantic relationships grow within the context of these other changes. Sarah stares at her phone as she tries to set up her profile on a new dating app. No wonder she is having so much trouble finding love. She cannot even decide what she is looking for. She knows she wants a partner who will be there for her when she needs support. Someone she can talk to and trust, but also someone funny she can hang with whom she has things in common. And at the same time, Sarah is looking for a person who appreciates her individuality and independence, who can help her achieve her goals and dreams without being suffocating or controlling. She wants to be connected to her partner but independent. Similar, but not the same. Is that too much to ask? According to Erikson's theory of psychosocial development, adolescents and emerging adults should prioritize self-focused identity development to prepare for the other focused stages of adulthood, starting with the challenge of intimacy versus isolation. As Erikson put it, the condition of two-ness is that one must first become oneself. Erikson, 1982, page 101. In this section, we explore how modern young adults navigate Erikson's developmental challenge of two-ness, the search for intimacy. Recall that Erikson described intimacy as the young adult challenge of establishing close and trusting relationships with others. Researchers like Carol Gilligan, who noted that Erikson did not take into account women's experiences, have argued that Erikson's proposed developmental sequence of identity first, intimacy second, is outdated and gender-biased. Gilligan, 1982. Given that emerging adulthood is both longer and more flexible in the 21st century, we may ask whether identity and intimacy can develop together, or even whether women, who exhibit intimate mutual sharing earlier within their adolescent friendships than do men, might develop them in the reverse order. Rudolph and Dodson, 2022. However, research has not consistently substantiated these criticisms. Longitudinal and cross-sectional studies have found that identity development in adolescence and emerging adulthood predicts intimacy and romantic partnership quality in early adulthood for both men and women, though women do report higher levels of intimacy. Bakken and Huber, 2005. Montgomery, 2005. Kerpelman et al., 2008. Bayers and Safe-Kranke, 2010. Kroger, 2015. Chizowska et al., 2019. According to intimacy researcher Ruth Sharabani, 1994, high-quality intimate relationships are characterized by frankness and spontaneity, sensitivity and knowing, exclusivity, giving and helping, imposing and taking, common activity, trust and loyalty, and secure attachment. Figure 12.24. While the security provided by attachment was originally studied as an aspect of infant caregiver relationships, Hazan and Schaefer, 1987, proposed that it continues to have value throughout the lifespan and in other close relationships, including adult romantic relationships. Indeed, secure adult attachment style is predictive of improved conflict resolution, mutual caring and trust, emotional closeness, and relationship satisfaction within young adult romantic relationships. Hayden et al., 2012. Waters et al., 2018. Given the effort of forming truly intimate romantic relationships and their apparent psychological depth, young adults meeting potential mates may find themselves asking, "Can I be committed to this person? Are we compatible? Can I tolerate their shortcomings, values, and lifestyle?" Korobov and Thorne, 2006, page 28. These are complex questions, with often uncertain answers. It is perhaps not surprising, then, that some young adults may choose to engage in no-strings-attached sexual relationships until they can feel more confident and certain about committing to an intimate romantic relationship with a person. The prevalence of casual sex that occurs outside a committed relationship, is about 10 to 15% lower than it was in 2007, with 22% of women and 24% of men between the ages 18 and 23 reporting they experienced casual sex within the last month. South and Lay, 2021. Casual sex can occur in a number of contexts, including hookups or one-night stands. But the friends with benefits relationship has received increasing attention in both pop culture and research for its potential to evolve into something more. Beeson and Levine, 2009. Mungo et al., 2013. Jovanovich and Williams, 2018. Makia et al., 2020. A friends with benefits relationship, FWBR, occurs when two people in a non-sexual relationship begin having sex, without committing to becoming a romantic couple. Although the relationship includes a certain level of closeness based on friendship and introduces sexual intimacy, the participants do not expect the same level of attachment or commitment required of a truly intimate romantic relationship. Makia et al., 2020. While a FWBR can provide a safe, familiar, and convenient context to explore sexual or romantic feelings with another person, research indicates women are more likely than men to view it as temporary, with greater expectations that it will eventually evolve into a romantic relationship or revert to a non-sexual friendship. In contrast, most men expected the relationship to remain a FWBR. Makia et al., 2020. The participants in heterosexual FWBR often do not realize or communicate these differing expectations. Besson and Levine, 2009, which may explain why most result in a complete end to a relationship of any kind, friendship or romantic, and only 15% evolve into romantic relationships. Makia et al., 2020. It depends. Breaking up is hard to do. Researchers at the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, wanted to know why couples in emerging adulthood break up. Nerona et al., 2017. They recruited a sample of young adults ages 18 to 25 who had recently initiated a breakup with their romantic partner and asked them to respond to the following prompt. Breaking up with a boyfriend or girlfriend is something that is very common. Have you been the one to initiate a breakup within the last 6 months? In other words, have you been the one to decide to break up with your boyfriend or girlfriend in the last 6 months? This includes breakups that you would consider mutual. If yes, smiley face. Tell us your story of the breakup. Describe what led you to break up with your last boyfriend or girlfriend. Please include enough detail to help another person understand how you thought and felt. The responses reflected the convergence of two themes of emerging adulthood: connection and independence. The most common reason young adults gave for ending relationships was that their romantic partner did not meet their desire for connection, such as with intimacy, shared time, or sexual satisfaction. These responses were consistent with Erikson's psychosocial challenge of establishing intimacy in early adulthood. On the other hand, the second most common reason given was the partner's failure to support the respondent's need for independence, such as maintaining their individual identity, meeting life goals, and preserving personal space and financial independence. These results highlighted the challenge for young adults of reconciling their need to develop the self with their desire to form connections with others. Romantic relationships. While Erikson and many others assert that the willingness and capacity for intimacy and romantic partnership are developmental priorities of early adulthood, we should not take this to mean that being single is developmentally problematic. While most people experience several committed romantic relationships during early adulthood, at any given time about half of young adults are single. Rauer et al., 2013, Cox, 2023. Those in committed romantic relationships do generally report higher life satisfaction than their single peers. But part of this satisfaction may come from recognizing that they are meeting social clock expectations for romantic involvement. This comparison to the social clock may be complicated by the developmental timing of sexual identity, particularly for those who are LGBTQ+. Adults who identified as LGBTQ+ during adolescence do not differ from heterosexual youth in the average timing of their first romantic relationship. However, those who do not identify as a sexual minority until adulthood do experience a delay in timing compared to their straight peers. Mernitz et al., 2023. Young adults who for various reasons do not want to be in a serious relationship find that, quote, singlehood is a source of happiness, well-being, and positive adjustment. Watkins et al., 2024. Many, 34% of men and 43% of women, are not interested in dating. Cox, 2023. And given that our developmental pathways become more varied with age, it is not reasonable to expect all adults of any age to follow the same path. Both single and partnered young adults who are satisfied with their current relationship status have above-average self-esteem, and age of first romantic relationship is unrelated to self-esteem. Gonzalez Aviles et al., 2023. For those looking for a partner, about one-third say they are having trouble finding someone. Cox, 2023. People generally gravitate towards those who are similar to them in things like values, personality features, interests, and in romantic relationships, the preference for those who are similar is called homogamy. Beyond similar values, young adults also prioritize traits such as faithfulness, intelligence, sense of humor, and physical attractiveness in romantic mates, although men place higher value on physical attractiveness than women. Eastwick et al., 2014. Blesk, Richek, and Ryan, 2015. Settings where you might regularly see someone and have something in common were identified as the most promising in-person environments for finding long-term love, with classes, organizations such as volunteer groups, religious services, and the workplace rated highest. For short-term hookups, young adults identified more temporary social settings, with bars, clubs, and parties rated the most likely environments. Jonason et al., 2015. Just over half of all young adults say they have also used dating apps, but more than half of women report having negative experiences, including being overwhelmed by the number of messages they get and not feeling safe, though perceived safety is higher for young adults than older adults. Only 20% of young adults say they found their current romantic partner online, but those with an LGBTQ+ identity are almost 3 times more likely than straight young adults to have done so. Vogels and McLean, 2023. Cox, 2023. Regardless of how they meet, most young adults use technology such as texting and social media to maintain their relationships. Besting et al., 2023. Although these avenues can increase positive relationship behaviors such as communication, connection, and sharing, they can also lead to negative outcomes such as miscommunication, monitoring, and controlling. Vaterlos et al., 2018. Basting et al., 2023. Interviews with adults ages 18 and 25 found that romantic partners who engage in excessive contact or expect constant communication can interfere with and distract from daily tasks. These problems were often accompanied by aggressive responses to perceived lapses in communication, as well as controlling and stalking the partner's social media use. Basting et al., 2023. The most fulfilling romantic relationships for young adults, regardless of their sexual orientation, are characterized by intimacy, passion, and commitment. Bauermeister et al., 2011. Such relationships can vary based on the extent of their positive qualities, such as support, disclosure, and affection. Negative qualities, such as control and criticism, duration, shared resources, and commitment. Based on these dimensions, Beckmeyer and Jameson, 2021, identified 5 romantic relationship typologies among young adults. Many were happily consolidated couples, 31%, in committed and successful long-term relationships. However, 23% were in long-term stuck relationships. Despite sharing resources such as by cohabitating, these couples reported more negative than positive qualities in their situation and had a pessimistic outlook on their future. 20% of young adults were experiencing happily independent relationships, characterized by many positive qualities but had not been together long enough to consolidate resources, such as a shared home. They usually had an optimistic outlook on their future. Figure 12.25. Exploratory relationships described 18% of couples, who were usually at the beginning of their relationship and casually dating. The least common relationships consisted of high-intensity couples. Despite having a lot of consolidated resources and high commitment to each other, high-intensity couples experience both highs and lows as they cycle unpredictably between positive behaviors like warmth and support and negative behaviors like criticism and antagonism. Yet they reported the highest life satisfaction among all 5 typologies, as well as the highest level of depressive symptoms and heavy drinking. This research highlights the wide variation in romantic experiences and trajectories young adults experience as they navigate their intimate relationships. Forming a family. Young adults also begin to form or extend their families in different ways, such as by cohabitating, getting married, and becoming parents. Cohabitation. By the end of young adulthood in their late 20s, 1/4 of all unmarried U.S. adults are cohabitating with a romantic partner, and the likelihood of progressing to this arrangement does not differ by sexual orientation. Julian, 2022, Orth and Rosenfeld, 2018. More young U.S. adults today are cohabiting with a romantic partner than with a spouse. Figure 12.26. Gurrentz, 2018. Two reasons for this difference are that young adults are entering their first marriage at a later age, 28 for women and 30 for men, and that the overall marriage rate is decreasing. Brown and Sheffield, 2020. As a result, most people now are accepting of living with a romantic partner outside marriage, especially young adults. Like married couples, most cohabitating couples cite love, companionship, and commitment as the primary reasons for living with one another. However, those who cohabitate are more likely than married couples to also cite financial reasons and convenience as motivators. Cohabitation is also seen by some as a way to test the relationship before marriage. And while most unmarried couples who are living together trust one another to be faithful and truthful, most do not trust their partner to handle money responsibly. Marriage. Married and unmarried couple report similar levels of satisfaction with their sex lives, but married couples are more satisfied with each other's communication and approach to parenting, and with their mutual work-life balance and division of household chores. Married people are also more likely to say they are closer to their partner than to any other adult. Manasseh Horowitz et al., 2019. However, these responses do not reflect the duration of the relationship. The average length of cohabitation for unmarried couples is only 18 months, compared to the average length of first marriages, which is 8 years. Van Orman, 2020, Taibbi, 2023. The stability of cohabitating partners is the same for same-sex and heterosexual couples. Ketchum and Bennett, 2019. By the end of young adulthood, only 32% of women and 23% of men are married. Brown and Manning, 2021, figure 12.27. Young adult attitudes and expectations regarding marriage vary geographically. Those living in rural areas are more likely to get married earlier and to view marriage as the natural and expected next step in a long-term relationship. Urban young adults are more likely to view marriage as a step that must be planned and delayed until other adult tasks, such as higher education, career development, and independent living can be completed. Swartz et al., 2017. Parenthood. Only 13% of U.S. adults are parents by age 24 and 45% by age 29. Martinez and Daniels, 2023. Like other developmental transitions, the experience of becoming a parent in young adulthood depends somewhat on contextual factors that influence a young person's perceived social clock. The median age of first birth for U.S. women is now 30, Morse, 2022, but it does vary by ethnicity and education level. Schaefer and Aragao, 2023. Martinez and Daniels, 2023. Black young adults and those with low income are more likely to view the transition to parenthood as a sign of adult maturity and a way to develop a sense of purpose. Eden and Kefeles, 2011. Racken and Gibson-Davis, 2017. Adjusting to parenthood can be difficult, however. It can reduce relationship satisfaction as well as young adults' self-control and emotional regulation, which is associated with an increase in instances of hostility and disagreement between new parents. Von Scheppingen et al., 2018, Grolleman et al., 2022, Bogdan et al., 2022. About half of young adult parents experience stress over balancing their roles at work and within the family, and women report more stress than men. Allen et al., 2020, likely due to the heightened role expectations of new motherhood. All relationships, including those between parents, have good days and bad days, and the self-esteem of new parents has been shown to vary with changes in their daily interactions. Figure 12.28. On good days, when new parents are more satisfied with their relationship and the responsiveness of their partner, their self-esteem rises. On bad days, it drops. Wilms et al., 2023. While it can be a mixed experience, most young adults say they do eventually want to become parents. However, 16% say they do not want or expect to have children. For some, 56%, this is a personal preference, while others cite concerns such as medical and financial reasons, or the state of the world and the environment. Brown, 2021. Brennan, 2023.